This video is about factoring when our a value is greater than 1. Just like the other times we factored, we're going to factor these into two binomials. But this time, since our a value is going to be a number greater than 1, in order to factor these, we're going to find a number where you multiply the a and c value, and then you're going to end up adding to your b value. So if we try a problem, the directions say factor each expression. So I'm going to take my a value and c value, and I'm going to multiply those together. So 5 times 2 is 10. So we're trying to find two numbers that multiply to 10, but then also add to our middle number, which is 11. If you need to write out the factors, you can. So we have 1 and 10, 2 and 5, and then 1 and 10 add to 11. So for now, this one, we have to do these problems a little bit different when our a value is greater than 1. And we're going to use a method called splitting the middle. So what we're going to do is I'm going to rewrite 5x squared plus 11x plus 2. So I'm rewriting the original problem. We found our factors, 1 and 10. And what we're going to do is we're going to split this middle term into 1x and 10x. Then what I'm going to do is bring down the 5x squared. And it was a positive 1x and a positive 10x. I'm going to put those plus signs there. And then I'm going to bring down our 2. So I just brought these two down. Then I'm going to group the first two terms and group the last two terms. Then I'm going to find what's the greatest common factor between 5x squared and 1x, and that's going to be an x. And then I'm left with 5x plus 1. And then between the 10x and the 2, the greatest common factor is a positive 2. So I'm write plus 2. And then I'm going to have left a 5x plus 1. Then we're going to write our two terms. Now what I like about doing factoring this way is I can always check my answer because in both of the terms we have a 5x plus 1. So that means that we factored it correctly. So my first term is going to be 5x plus 1, and then the second term, we're going to combine this x and this positive 2. So then our second term is going to be x plus 2. So our answer is going to be 5x plus 1 times x plus 2. Go ahead and pause the video and try number 2 on your own. Number 2, we have 6x squared minus 11x plus 4. First, we're going to multiply our a and c term together. So we're trying to find two numbers that multiply to 24 and then add to our middle term, which is a negative 11. So our factors of 24, 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6. Since we're multiplying to a positive number and adding to a negative number, I know that both of the numbers need to be negative. And if I add 3 plus 8, I get 11. And to make that a negative 11, I'm going to make both of them negative. So then we have negative 3 times negative 8 is a positive 24, and negative 3 plus a negative 8 is a negative 11. So now we're going to go ahead and rewrite our original trinomial. So I'm going to rewrite 6x squared minus 11x plus 4. And I'm going to split that middle term up into negative 3x and negative 8x. And I'm going to bring down the 6x squared. And I'm going to bring down the positive 4. And I'm going to group the first two terms together and the last two terms together. And you can put a little plus sign between those two parentheses if you want to. Then what we're going to do is we're going to find the greatest common factor of 6x squared and negative 3x, and that's going to be a 3x. Then we're going to be left with 2x minus 1. Then, since our first term in the second set of parentheses has a negative, I need to take out a negative number. And the greatest common factor between the 8x and the 4 is going to be a negative 4. So I have to take out that negative. So now we're left with 2x and then minus 1. And as we can see, to kind of check yourself as you go, you can tell that these two terms are the same, which means that you're doing it correctly. And now we can write our two terms, which is 3x minus 4, which comes from the 3x, and the negative 4, and then our second set of terms is the 2x minus 1. So here is our answer. Number 3, we have 6x squared plus 13x plus 5. So first we're going to multiply our a and c term. So we're trying to multiply to 30, and we're trying to add to 13. So all my factors of 30 are 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, and 5 and 6. And which one of those adds to 13? Well, 3 plus 10 adds to 13. So I'm going to rewrite our original trinomial, 6x squared plus 13x plus 5. We're going to split that middle term up into our two numbers, 3x and 10x, and they're both positive. Then I'm going to bring down the 6x squared and bring down the 5. Now I'm going to group the first two terms and the second two terms together. Our greatest common factor of 6x squared and 3x is 3x. And then I'm left with 2x plus 1. My second term, we have a 10x and a 5, and our greatest common factor there is a positive 5. Then we're left with 2x plus 1. Again, to kind of check my work, I'm noticing that both of them have that factor of 2x plus 1. So I'm going to write 2x plus 1 as my first factor. And my second one, I'm going to combine the 3x and the positive 5. So I have 3x plus 5. And that is my answer. Go ahead and pause the video and try number 4 on your own. Again, for number 4, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to multiply our a and c term together. So 3 times a negative 15 is a negative 45. And we're trying to add to a positive 4. So I'm going to list all the factors of 45. So we have 1 and 45, 3 and 15, 5 and 9. And then since we're multiplying to a negative number, I know that one of the numbers has to be negative. And if I do 9 minus 5, I get 4. So therefore I know the 5 must be negative. So I'm going to pick these two numbers. Then I'm going to rewrite my trinomials. So I have 3x squared plus 4x minus 15. Then I'm going to split that middle term up into negative 5x and positive 9x. And bring down the 3x squared and bring down the negative 15. I'm going to combine the first two terms and the last two terms. The greatest common factor between 3x squared and a negative 5x is just an x. That's what they have in common. And then what's going to be left is a 3x minus 5. And then in our second term, the greatest common factor is a 3. So I have a positive 3, and then what's going to be left is a 3x minus 5. And to check my work, These are the same, both of them are 3x minus 5, so that looks good. So now I can write my two terms. I have x plus 3, and I have 3x minus 5. For number 5, I have 30x squared plus 93x minus 42. So don't forget, whenever we look at these problems, we always want to check first to see if we can factor out a greatest common factor first, and then you can finish factoring the trinomial. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at this and see if there is a greatest common factor that we can take out. And I can actually divide each of these by 3, which means that that would be our greatest common factor. So I'm going to rewrite this. If I pull a 3 out, we would be left with 10x squared plus 31 minus 31x minus 14. Now I'm going to factor this like normal. I'm trying to see what multiplies to 10 times negative 14 is a negative 140, and then what adds to 31. So these are pretty big numbers already, and if we didn't factor out that 3 from the beginning, these numbers would be even larger. So that's why we always want to factor out the greatest common factor first if we can. So right now I'm going to write a list of all the factors of 140. So here's a list of all the factors. I notice I'm trying to multiply to a negative number. So I know one of the numbers has to be negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start subtracting all the numbers. And when I subtract 35 minus 4, I notice that that is 31. So I know that I'm going to need a negative 4 and a positive 35. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite that factored trinomial. So I'm going to write 10x squared plus 31x minus 14. And we're not going to worry about, or we're not going to forget about this 3. So we'll worry about it at the end, but for right now, let's worry about factoring this. So I'm going to split that middle term up into negative 4x and positive 35x. And it doesn't matter what order you put those in, which one goes first and which one goes second. And then I'm going to rewrite 10x squared and the negative 14. I'm going to group the first two terms and the last two terms together. The greatest common factor of 10x squared and negative 4x is going to be at 2x, and then I'm going to be left with 5x minus 2. And then in the second term, the greatest common factor is a positive 7. And then I'm going to be left with 5x minus 2. And now I'm going to rewrite this into the factored form. So we have 5x minus 2, and then I'm going to put these together, 2x plus 7, and now we're not going to forget about this 3 right here that we factored out from the beginning. That has to go in your answer. That's part of the factored form. So here is our answer, 3 times 5x minus 2 times 2x plus 7. Go ahead and pause the video and try number 6 on your own. For number 6, we have negative 4x squared plus 26x plus 14. So first thing I notice is that our a term has a negative number, so we definitely need to factor out a negative, but we also want to see if there's anything else we can factor out beyond that. And looking at those numbers 4, 26, and 14, I could divide all of those by 2, so that means I can factor out a negative 2, and then I'm going to be left with 2x squared minus 13x minus 7. So think of just dividing all of those terms by a negative 2, and that'll kind of help you. Okay, now we're going to factor this, so let's see what multiplies to 2 times 7. So what multiplies to a negative 14, and what adds to a negative 13. So that's what we're trying to find. So our factors are 1 and 14 and 2 and 7. I notice I'm multiplying to a negative number, so one of those numbers has to be negative. And I notice that if I pick a positive 1 and a negative 14, that'll multiply to a negative 14, but also add to a negative 13. So now, again, we're not going to forget about this negative 2. We'll remember that at the end, but first I'm going to rewrite 2x squared minus 13x minus 7. Let's factor that first. So I'm going to split up this middle term into 1x and a negative 14x. And I'm going to rewrite the 2x squared and the negative 7. I'm going to group these together. What's the greatest common factor between 2x squared and 1x? Well, we have an x in common, so now we have left 2x plus 1. And in the second term, what's in common, the greatest common factor there is a negative 7. So I'm going to pull out that negative 7, and I'm left with a 2x plus 1. And now I'm going to write my answer. We have 2x plus 1 times x minus 7. And we're not going to forget this negative 2 at the beginning that we factored out. And we're going to put that right in the front. And there is our answer. Number 7, we have 16x squared y plus 44xy plus 30y. So here we have a lot of variables. So first we're going to see if we can factor any of those out at the very beginning. And also we're going to see if there's a number that we can pull out at the beginning too. So first we need to find our greatest common factor. And it looks like for all of these I could divide each of them by 2. And then I can also take a y out of each one of these. So I'm going to rewrite this as 2y, that I'm factoring out. And then we're going to be left with 8x squared plus 22x plus 15. And once you factor this out, double check it, look at it again, and make sure that you can't pull out something larger than a 2. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to see what multiplies to 8 times 15. And 8 times 15 is 120. So what multiplies to 120 and what adds to 22. So I'm going to write down all the factors of 120. So I found my pair, which is 10 and 12. Now those add to 22 and they also multiply to 120. So now I'm going to write my factor trinomial. I have 8x squared plus 22x plus 15. Remember, don't forget about that 2y. But we're going to split the middle and write 10x plus 12x and bring down the 8x squared and bring down the positive 15. Group them together and find the greatest common factor. So for our first term, 8x squared and 10x, we could pull out a 2x, and then we would be left with 4x plus 5. And then for the second term, 12x and 15, I can pull out a 3, and then I'd be left with 4x plus 5. And now we're going to write our answer, which is 2x plus 3 times 4x plus 5. And don't forget about that 2y from the beginning that we factored out, and we're going to write that here. And there is our final answer. Go ahead and pause the video and try number 8 on your own. Number 8, we have 9x to the 4th plus 15x cubed plus 6x squared. So first I'm going to find the greatest common factor. So looking at all these numbers, I can take an x squared out of each of these terms, and I can also take a 3 out of them. So I'm going to factor out from the beginning a 3x squared. So now I'm left with 3x squared plus 5x plus 2. Then I'm going to see what multiplies to 3 times 2, which is 6. So I'm seeing what multiplies to 6 and what adds to our middle term, which is 5. So the factors of 6 are 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. So 2 and 3 add to 5, so I'm going to pick those two numbers. Now I'm going to write my factored trinomial. So we have 3x squared plus 5x plus 2. And again, don't forget about this 3x squared right here. We'll write that in our answer. So I'm going to split that middle term between a positive 2x and a positive 3x. And I'm going to rewrite that 3x squared and rewrite that 2. I'm going to group them together. What's in common in the first group is an x. So I can pull out an x, and then I'm left with 3x plus 2. Now, in the second group, there's nothing in common except for a 1. So I'm actually going to pull out a positive 1. And then we're going to be left with the same thing, the 3x plus 2. So now the two terms are going to be x plus 1 is our first binomial, and 3x plus 2 is our second binomial. And then don't forget about that 3x squared that we pulled out all the way at the beginning. So this would be our final answer. 3x squared times x plus 1 times 3x plus 2.